Welcome back to Real Talk here at the NASDAQ market site in New York City, Times Square. Joining me here on the set is Bonin Bough, the former Chief Media Officer for Mondelēz International. How are you, Bonin?
I am fabulous. How are you, sir?
I am doing excellent. Now, we are talking on this episode of Real Talk all about risk-taking CMOs, and I know you've spent the last decade plus of your career. You've worked for some notable brands like PepsiCo, most recently Mondelēz. You're currently an advisor as well through your company. Yep. So let's jump right into it. Risk-taking.
Okay.
How much of a risk-taker do you have to be if you want to be able to survive in today's marketing climate at brands?
At the end of the day, I think that's the only game in town is risk taking, right? I mean, you don't win if you don't try. And so I think that, but I think the most important thing to me was always, yes, people used to talk about that I've done a lot of risky things, but everything was calculated risk as well. So I think you're not reckless, but you know that the world is going this way. I always think about it this way. If I can see that this is where the world's going, the only battle is how fast can I get there. And so I think that most people don't take the time to build the capability to sense where the world is going so that they literally have intuition and gut and have enough directional markers that say, this is definitely where the world is going. All you have to do is get there quick.
Now, when you were over at Mondelēz,
Yeah.
Dunk in the Dark happened.
Sure.
And that's one of the things that oftentimes people talk about today in marketing. We were just doing social media geek out on this
like
set
6 years old,
an hour ago, and Dunk in the Dark came up. At every marketing conference I'm at, Dunk in the Dark comes up. Maybe speak to the viewers out there that aren't necessarily familiar with what happened behind the scenes when the Super Bowl happened and from the time the lights went off to the time that post went out.
Well, it was 4 minutes from the time the lights. I was at the Super Bowl, so I pulled the lights so that we could have our moment. Now, 4 minutes later, we were able to push out a tweet that said you can still dunk in the dark. But I think really, and that's what's interesting about that story, is that the case study's been told so many times. But there's a lot, to your point, of backstory. So everybody asks, oh my God, how were you able to get a tweet out in 4 minutes? Well, if you guys look back, the very first program that we did was Twist, Slick, and Dunk. And so the idea there was, Daily Twist. And the idea there was for 100 days, we put out a social post that was reflective of what was happening in culture at that time. So we had built the muscle memory over 100 days in 8 countries, learning what it took for us to get through legal, how we could move creative fast, you know, what's the actual process from concept to posting. So we had matured that behavior. And even before then, if you actually look back, the war room concept, what people forget is that when I was at PepsiCo, I launched Gatorade Mission Control, which was a glass room, 5 people sitting in it, 6 screens. It was the first of those corporate war rooms that showed in real-time insights that were happening. So I had already learned what it took to build out war rooms, what was necessary from a process standpoint, and really put that in place at Mondelēz, but at a scale that we hadn't done for my time at PepsiCo. So I guess to that point, and that's where I say calculated risk. Like, is it a risk to have built social media war rooms around big events? No, because we had already seen how that could work. So, and even when we first built the room, who didn't want to see? What I really wanted to do when we first built Mission Control was so that I could visualize what was actually being talked about by the consumer so that people could walk by and the culture of the organization could be impacted. To me, I actually think that's the biggest thing. So we can talk about risk, we can talk about those things. The most important thing is building an organization that centers around a culture that actually moves the ball forward. At Mondelēz, we used to talk about it, our marketing mantra was fearless. So we were going to be fearless. We were going to do the things that other marketers wouldn't do. And I think at its core, that's really what this is about. How do you build organizations that have the DNA of pushing the envelope?
Now, you're a digital guy, okay? In the previous segment, we had Nick Utton on the set, and we're going to be bringing Nick back on here in a moment for you guys to go ahead and kind of debate with each other. But Nick is more of a traditionalist when it comes to media buying. You're more of digital ad buying. So how do you go ahead as a C-suite executive that's on the digital side, wrestle with your contemporaries in terms of trying to get that ad budget from them?
Well, the good news was when I was at Mondelēz, I ran everything. So I ran You know, we're the 7th largest media buyer, rent, TV, print, digital, out of home, you name it. And I actually think that you bring up, and that's why it was so easy. We moved from 3% to almost 32% spending. We added $2 billion of incremental net revenue to top line, $300 million to bottom line and savings. And I think that that point that you bring up is that there's so much still a bifurcation in the media suite. There's even a bifurcation in terms of, you know, we're going up on upfronts. There's a bifurcation with new fronts and traditional upfronts, and never the twain shall meet. In fact, I used to not like going to the new fronts because I didn't want to signal that we should have a separation, because that's where the challenge becomes, is that tension that is then created inside of organizations when there's a digital buyer and a traditional buyer. And that was what I thought was really exciting about what Dana Anderson put in place, was saying, I want a digital guy to lead all media. And I thought that was interesting.
Now, how do you divide up where that budget goes? And I'll just share with you, as a former social media manager at a brand like Winn-Dixie, where 97% of the marketing budget goes to print, but then 3% goes to social, it's kind of hard to keep up with the Publixes and Walmarts of the world.
That sounds really hard. You know, again, and I think Nick would attest to the same thing, is that that's the first thing you have to do, is you have to take digital versus traditional and those separations out of your mind. You have to say, okay, where is the consumer that I'm trying to target, and what point of their, what amount of their attention is in those places, and as a result, how does the investment lay out and warrant that, regardless of what channel it is. We used to talk about connections planning. How do all the channels connect? How do we step back and we plan from data and insights of the consumer and their consumption behavior? And also, then the other piece that's important is, what are you trying to get them to do? So we can say digital, print, da, da, da. If I'm trying to get them to pick up another pack of gum at point of sale, then those big billboards that used to sit behind registers are really important to me. And so I think that that's really, what am I trying to do? What does the creative warrant? Sometimes the creative is much better. And I remember IBM did a campaign, it was Living Cities, and they did, like, one of the out-of-home pieces was a bench, and it was an ad that then curled into a bench. Now, couldn't do that digitally. That was, you know, so I think those are the, I think it's much more nuanced, and I think, you know, Nick talked about it earlier, which is it's becoming more science than art, but it's also the art of science. And so I think that that's where I think we have to really begin to move away from traditional versus digital, and really think about, how do we continue to put the customer and the objectives at the center.
Now, since we're talking about risk-taking, are you impressed by the state of marketing today? When you look at the landscape of all the top brands?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the only thing that I would like to see more of is ownership of our importance and culture. So I remember I was trying to do a film with animal crackers, right? And the first thought was, well, nobody's going to go see Animal Crackers. I'm like, if Lego can do it, we can do it. Where is Pepsi the movie? Where's Oreo the movie? Like, because we also have a big place in culture. And
When you say that's Madagascar, by the way?
What?
Doing an Animal Crackers
Fair
movie?
enough, fine, yeah, except it didn't say Animal Crackers on it, and wasn't a 2-hour, you know, engagement piece for my brand that would help drive. So yes, fair, Madagascar. But for me, I think that we've forgotten that we are actually brand builders versus just seller of products. And so when you look at something like Disney and Lego, like, they're bigger than, so the movie of Animal Crackers would have been much bigger than the business, almost a 20x bigger than the business. But what's different between, I'm really building Animal Crackers, now of course it would impact the sales too, I'm really building Animal Crackers the brand, really building Oreo the brand. Why doesn't Oreo deserve to have clothing line? Why can't brands make more of their brand than just the single products that they sell? And again, I think Lego has done a tremendous job around that. Disney has clearly done a great job around that. Where's Oreo, the theme park? Where is, you know, those kind of things, and not just them, all the brands. And so I think that we have a bigger place. Like, we launched Twist, Lick, and Dunk the game. People, it was cash positive. We made money on it. It's still making money. Makes money, and what's even more interesting, people paid it for 2 minutes. People play it for 2 minutes and 41 seconds, and so that is you playing it, quote unquote, ad, and other advertisers advertising in that ad is pretty meta. But us just knowing that the brand is much bigger than the products that we sell.
Yeah, let's talk about evolution for a moment with more traditional brands. I know we were having a conversation about this at South by Southwest recently. I'll give you an example. Old Spice, I think, has done a tremendous job to appeal to more of a younger audience now. Growing up as a kid, my dad wore Old Spice, and I associate it with, like, an older man's deodorant. Well, now I wear Old Spice because packaging has changed. The commercials have changed. You have the Old Spice man. They have an active presence on social media. So how important is it for more of these traditional brands? And look, let's bring up an example. There's a Toys R Us closing down a block up the street from this studio. So how important is it for more of these traditional brands to evolve to today's consumer?
I'm going to a retail event. right after this. I think that, yeah, there's new business models and there's modernization of where the consumer is at. And so I think, you know, I'm blown away, and we talk about this, and so we right now doing a ton of research on Gen Z. I think we're going to have the largest data set for the US on Gen Z, real time, where people can actually go and ask to our data set questions. But you know, we ask simple things like what's more important, experiences, price. Experiences are the most important thing in a world where you can read everything, you can find everything. People want to have experiences, and that's why retail, you know, models like the Museum of Ice Cream, where it's literally just Instagrammable moments, are exploding.
Which, by the way, is a pop-up museum. It's not here all the time. I believe it's in Brooklyn.
It pops up in Brooklyn, but there's one in Miami and one in LA that are permanent.
I've seen friends of mine that take these amazing Instagram photos, and I ask them, where is that? Because I don't want to go for the ice cream. I don't even want to go see the museum. I just want to go for those Instagrammable moments.
Well, that's the whole thing. I mean, if you look at Refinery 29, what they've done with 29 rooms, I mean, that's all it is Instagrammable moments, and it's a huge franchise. But I think the fact of the matter is that that's what consumers want. So how does retail become more experiential? I mean, I think we took the modernization of retail. Apple stores kind of did that. Now I think it's how do you make it more experiential? And the other thing that's going to happen is how does retail become more responsive? And so, you know, look, I remember I kept pushing, retail's changing, retail's changing. I tried to build a retail lab back in the days to look at the future of retail. Couldn't get it done. I was told that the shopping experience, consumers love to shop. And I said, okay, so it's a mom of two goes in the store, one kid is screaming and yelling at the top of their lungs, and the other one's pulling cereal boxes down as they're walking through the aisles, and she's like, you know what, loved it, let's do it again. No way. The retail experience has to change, and now what's interesting is you have Whole Foods being bought by Amazon, and now everybody's like, oh my God, retail's changing. How do we not see it coming? It's like, what? And so that's the question is how is the store going to be more responsive? Should Gatorade cost more when it's hotter out? I don't know if that's the answer, but if you really look at the way the internet operates, how are we going to digitize those store and that retail, and then also how does retail become more experiential? And look, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, it might be a different wave. To your point, evolution, and more scary than evolution is that the consumer is moving at a pace that we've never seen before. So we asked, and you know, Snapchat is still doing better across the Gen Z's, you know, the folks that we asked, than Instagram and Facebook. I was blown away.
The mistake that I see, you know, we're right here in Times Square. You look out this window and you see literally thousands of people walking by. There's billboards. I've been taking a look at the billboards above.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? But none of these billboards are driving me back to this.
No, of course not.
Not one of them. Not one of them is saying, go to this hashtag for an experience, take a photo here in Times Square, take a photo, like you've got all this retail space. No one's leveraging that. Where I see the marketing mix is still divided, and you've got outdoor, at home, and digital, which are all completely different silos.
I mean, that's why we built connection planning, so that you would actually look at a map and see where's the drop-off. Okay, we left somebody at a billboard. Can we take them to a phone? And how do we integrate that into communication? And it rose the impact of our advertising over the four and a half years, or 4 years that it was, well, we were, at least during the time I was there. But I agree with you. I think that people aren't thinking holistically about how do I connect all these dots. More important for me right now, the biggest challenge is going to be most manufacturers are data poor, but yet the guys that are winning are data rich. So when you look at the Dollar Shave Clubs of the world, I tried to buy Nature Box before I left, and you look at like a Nature Box, those guys are all data rich. And that's why they know, not only do they know everything about their consumer, they can predict the purchase behaviors because they've understood the lifetime value and behavior of that consumer. And so that's what we have to ask. Would I be willing to sell, everybody can get a free soda if they just text me? Well, I don't know. If a can of soda costs $1.50, that seems pretty cheap for a phone number, and I can begin to build a true data pool on every. That's the crazy thing, and why I've been investing in a lot of messaging technology companies. You talk to a guy like Ryan Leslie, and he has a platform called Superphone.
We're going to have here on the set.
Boom.
A couple weeks.
There you go. So Ryan,
if you want to come back, let's get you on with
I love a good Ryan. Ryan's, I think, a visionary in this space, and he came up with the same problem after selling, you know, a tremendous album before. He said, why can't I just sell it to every single bought my album before? Because he didn't know who they were. And so he said, well, let me fix that. And that's the question we should ask, is why can't I just sell the same product to the person who bought it before? Clearly you made an indication that you like it, but I don't know who you are.
Right.
I have nothing. And so that chasm has to be fixed. But they're not, I still firmly believe there's a lot of people that just don't believe the future is really where it is.
What would you say in 30 seconds is your biggest piece of advice or tip to your marketing contemporaries?
continue to do the things that you know are right, regardless of if people tell you, oh, maybe we should slow down or not now. I always felt that it was my obligation to put the stuff in the world that we all knew was right and to give everybody an example that they could point to in the boardroom and say, if they can do it, why can't we?
Excellent. Bonin Bough, thank you so much.
Thank you,
Fist
sir.
bumps. Thank you for coming on to Real Talk. We're going to
My pleasure.
sit tight. We're going to bring Nick Utton back on the set for our Real Talk Roundup. Stay tuned.